If it's not documented, it didn't happen. Not to your board and funders, not to regulators, not to the public. A lack of documentation is not an inconvenience. It's a risk multiplier. Hello again. Welcome back. I hope you all had a fantastic Thanksgiving if you celebrate that. I am Nkoyo Effiong-Lewis, attorney, strategist, and the creator of the Impact Triad framework, here to help executive directors and board chairs build resilient, future-proof organizations that deepen their impact without burnout or apology. And you have joined us in here on day 8 of the Governance in Real Time micro series, where we are helping you strengthen your systems that your organizations depend on in real time. Each session actually leads with a place for you to assess where you are and take a next best step forward. And I'll share with you one group's opportunity to move forward at the end, but I'll mention it here too. We have the Govern Audaciously, How to Protect, Prepare, and Position Your Nonprofit for 2026, happening in 4 days on December 2nd at 12 p.m. Eastern. It is live and virtual. So I encourage you to hit the link in the comments and register. It is completely free, and I hope you'll be in the room with us, because we're actually going to go a little bit more deeper cohesively around what you need to do in one power-packed hour. So I hope you will join me there. Today, though, and over the next 15-20 minutes, I'm going to break down the essential documentation that every nonprofit must have in place, especially heading into 2026, and why it matters even more now. So, if you're ready, get your pen and your paper. All right, I think we are back on. So, my apologies, little tech snafu. What you gonna do? All right, well, let me just jump back in here. Today we are talking about the documentation your nonprofit needs most in 2026. And where I started was letting you know that, again, if you have not documented things, it didn't happen. Not to your board, not to your funders, not to regulators and the public. A lack of documentation is not just an inconvenience, it is a risk multiplier. And I'm going to talk with you today around why, from a governance standpoint, we want to make sure that we have strong documentation, especially for those of you who are in advocacy organizations, movement leaders, those that are advocating for folks that are marginalized, advocating for the dignity and rights of people who are marginalized, those of you who are running Black-led, Black benefiting, and other organizations that really center support around and are building power around identities, causes, and communities that have often been left out. And so we are going to spend the next 15 to 20 minutes really talking about the essential documentation that every nonprofit must have in place before 2026, and why it's even more important now than ever. And I think also why documentation from a historical standpoint, in a moment in time where we're seeing history be erased or mixed, and where we've lived through a period of time where history has been cherry-picked and things have not always been as accurately depicted. We haven't always had full story, why it's important that your organization is committed to documentation. So I mentioned there are 3 types of documentation that we really got to have together as we move into a period of increased political scrutiny, more sort of a world that is existing with less credibility and trust in institutions and organizations, and why, again, it's so important that we are not only exercising our CYA, which is important and necessary, but also making sure that we're providing people with the level of transparency and integrity that they need to invest in growing our vision alongside of us. So let me hop in here. The first type of governance documentation that you need to have, the first type of documentation that you need to have is governance documentation. And so this includes things like your board minutes, your committee minutes, your bylaws, your policies, how you have made decisions, actually recording those things. And technically, if you're a 501c3, you should have your application for tax exempt status also available so that it can be if someone from the public wants to review those documents, that you have those readily on hand. But in an ongoing practice, we really want to make sure that we have governance documentation in place. As a tax-exempt organization, whether you're C3 or C4, which are the organizations that I work with the most, you are bound by your bylaws. Like, the way that we have laid that out is how we are saying that we are going to run this organization. And so our bylaws and policies are really crucial documents that help us all stay on track around what needs to happen as we are moving and shaking and trying to change the world. We also, of course, want to make sure that at board meetings we are recording the minutes, and not necessarily everything that's happened. There's an art and science to recording accurate board minutes, but we definitely want to be recording any decisions that are being made, so that, one, we are able to come back to them later, a year from now, or when the next board joins, they can see historically what has happened, what decisions have been made, and also so that there's a record in the event that we're ever audited. So again, your governance documentation is the first type, an important type, because this is your organizational memory. This is what helps people know what they need to do from one board leadership to the next. And oftentimes when we have changes in leadership, whether that's on the staff level or on the board level, a lot of intellectual capital is lost, right? A lot of the historical nature of what things were, how things were going, walks out the door with people. And so we want to make sure that we are committing it to a medium that can be shared. This is also, I believe, really important for legacy work. It's hard to have a legacy. It's hard to pass on the lessons if they're not documented somewhere in some form. And that's not to say that written is the only way. I know there's this weird world we've preferenced that, and there's so many ways that oral tradition has been passed down, but we also want to make sure that it exists in the event that we can't find the people to tell us the stories, that it's recorded somewhere and people can literally pick up the playbook and keep going. And this is what's really necessary, I think, for making sure that impact lasts beyond your leadership. We really don't want people starting over again. I think if we look at the political world right now, fights that had been fought generation ago are being fought again. And in some instances, we have the tools we can pick up and say, this is what worked and how we can adapt it. And in other places, we are scrambling, trying to figure out what our ancestors did to get us to this point. And so if we are more intentional as leaders of change, as social disruptors who are fighting for a status quo that actually honors the dignity of all people, it's important that we create that organizational memory that we can actually pass on from leadership to leadership. The second type of documentation that your organization needs now, and this is timely because we're headed into Giving Tuesday and what I like to call giving season, the biggest season for giving of the year. Those end of the year tax write-offs that folks need to get really does incentivize a lot of people who have maybe looked and seen that they might owe a whole lot to figure out how they commit some of that money to causes that they and communities that they are aligned with. And so this is a huge opportunity for you all, and some of you are probably feeling the pressure of making sure that Giving Tuesday and giving season is what it needs to be in light of so much pullback and hesitancy from funders, and then the government, playing games with funding that they've already said they're going to allocate. But that's a separate conversation. So the second type of documentation that you want to make sure you have is financial and fiscal documentation. We need to know what's going on with the money, friends. We do. I have the benefit and privilege of attending a large Black church, and one thing that I love about people in the church is they want to know what's going on with their tithes and gifts and offerings, right? And it is the same thing with our donors. And if we're honest, probably churches are one of the number one places where individual giving happens on the regular. And so a lot of people are accustomed to or have been concerned by the lack of transparency or clarity around where the money's going. And so this is low-hanging fruit. Hear me out. I know documentation can be a lot, but I honestly think that it is low-hanging fruit for people who want to know what happened with the resources that they provided to your organization. And you have an opportunity to tell a story about that, to put that in terms that people can understand, from an operational to a programmatic to whatever level it needs to happen. But you can't do that if you don't have strong financial and fiscal documentation in place. And so what does that look like? What does that include? That's your fiscal controls. Hopefully you all have a fiscal policies and procedures around how money moves, what we do with it, what money we accept. I did a training earlier this year talking about ethical fundraising and building trust and how important it is that we're taking money that's aligned with the work that we're doing and our mission, so that we aren't cheating our mission to make sure our funders are happy, but actually that we're finding funders that actually want to see the same mission and vision that we are pushing after happen. You also want to have audit records, your gift acceptance decisions. This kind of goes back to when will we accept a gift, when won't we, and what documentation needs to go with that. I like to remind people again, because again, we're headed into a big giving season, that when people give you $250 or more, you are required by law to actually provide them with a donor acknowledgement letter, some sort of documentation that records that for the tax purposes. And so you want to make sure that you have those policies in place, you have your language in place, so that you can get that out to people within 30 days of when they have made that that donation, so that you can stay on the right side of all of the fundraising laws and regulations that apply to nonprofits. And let me put my disclaimer, I haven't been saying this, I should, that again, while I am an attorney, I am not standing up here giving out any sort of legal advice. This is all for educational and informational purposes, and to the extent that you hear something and you're like, ooh, I don't know if I'm on the right side of the law of that, my only piece of legal advice that I'm going to give you in this setting is that you should contact an attorney. And if you need help doing that or finding something, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm more than happy to make a connection. In this role capacity, we're really focused on the compliance and governance parts, because I have seen, as someone who represented nonprofits, that a lot of times we have some organizational structural challenges that prevent us from actually complying effectively with the rules and regulations. So do not put in the chat, oh girl, we're not doing this, right? Like, don't share your legal business. Just let me know. Send me a private message like, hey, you mentioned something. I might need to have a further conversation and get connected. But anyway, we're talking about the types of fiscal and financial documentation that your organization needs. We talked about fiscal controls, audit records, gift acceptance decisions, all your gift acceptance protocol that you need to do to comply with the rules and regulations around that. Grant reporting. I think this is a big one that, folks want to go after the grants, and I think that's great. There's big money out there if you are aligned, but a lot of times that money comes with with strings attached, and some of that includes reporting, and so you want to make sure that you have the infrastructure set up to do those reports on time, so that you can meet the expectations of your grantors and maintain those grants. And then, of course, even internally, you want to have budget updates. I think it is incredibly dangerous for organizations to be talking about how they're going to allocate money without seeing or having updated budgets in front of them to make sure that that money is there, that if it's unrestricted money, that they have enough unrestricted funds to do that thing, and that they're not accidentally using restricted funds to fund unrestricted things. We got to keep all of that stuff airtight, crystal clear, because this is your credibility with funders. And whether those are big funders, like your foundations and big grantors, or your donors, don't sleep on the individual donors. Don't sleep on a $50 a month recurring donor. But, even if they're the $5,000, $500,000 donor, we want to make sure that we maintain credibility with them, because people are investing in you and the vision that your organization is leading forward. And so we want to make sure that we are always keeping and honoring the integrity and the trust that is at the foundation of any type of funding relationship. So that's the second type. Again, type 1, we want to have our governance documents. Type 2, we want to have our fiscal and financial documentation. And the third type of documentation that we absolutely want to make sure that we have at all times in place, especially as we head into 2026, is our strategic and our operational documentation. And this is also a place where, again, what I talked about, that legacy leading can happen in terms of making sure that we have the story and the arc and what we've been doing in the work recorded in some type of medium, so that whoever it comes along behind us can pick up from the good learning that we have already done and the momentum that we've already built to carry forward the work. And so these types of documents include your strategic plans. I know you're probably laughing like, strategic plans? Have you seen how the world has shifted overnight? And it's true. We're going to need to have tighter timelines on our strategic plans. We're going to need to be thinking about what strategy looks like differently, incorporating some scenario planning in there. But we need to have something documented about what our North Star is, regardless of the uncertainty that is around us, so that we're not shapeshifters and chameleons around the work. You want to have your program reports so we actually know what happened. I think this is very helpful to then also communicate it back to the people who are investing and running this race with you. Your partnership agreements. I am an attorney by training, and so I am very committed to things being in writing. If we're doing any sort of collaborations with others, joint ventures, co-marketing, whatever it is, that we have some clean documentation about that, so that if something goes awry or someone wants to come and check and make sure that we're on the up and up, we can present that and that we have that clarity. I have shared before, clarity is kind. I think that's Brené Brown. I keep talking about being clear and how clarity actually helps us move forward faster. So it matters to slow down and take the time to have clarity and full understanding before we are moving and marching forward on things. The other documentation you want to make sure you have, I always do this. I don't know what I'm going to do. I got to lock this thing in here. The other documentation that you want to make sure that you have are your crisis protocols. This one is a big one right now. And if you're not connected to PR people, if you don't have that internally, if you don't have legal internally to help you think about what you do in the event of a crisis, like, let's talk. We need to have a plan for this. Like, what happens if something gets out, your org gets listed on one of these nefarious lists, these crazy lists that are out here. Someone specifically in your organization gets named publicly. What do we do? What's the plan? What is this digital security plan that we have, the physical security plan that we have? I think it's unfortunate we have to think about these things, but we do, and it's better to be prepared. I'd rather be over-prepared than caught with my pants hanging down, right? Is that the phrase? So we want to make sure that we have these crises protocols in place, and that the people that need to know to activate these things know what the plan is, know where to access it, so that we can take action rapidly in the event that we need to, and take measured action, right? We don't have to just react. We can respond. That is the goal. And the crisis protocol helps us to have a response plan in place in the event that a crisis happens. And then but definitely not least, we want to have documentation of our staff roles and our workflows. And I know y'all are probably tired of me talking about having a replicable way for the work to get done. But in all the work that I do, that's what I talk to people about all day, is like, let's think about the system. Let's think about the process around how this gets done, so that we're not guessing each time, that we can operate from a plan, a path of clarity, that we iterate and improve over time, rather than just each time trying to just make it up as we go. I have spent most of my career in the nonprofit space, and so I know that we are always accustomed to building the plane while we fly it. But we should have built enough planes by now that we have a general idea of how the plane gets built, and each time we can just be improving upon that process, which is, I think, an incredibly important skill, an incredibly important tool for us to build nonprofit organizations that are not only impactful, but also sustainable. And so these documents, this tier 3 of documents, the strategic and operational documentation, this is your stability. This is your oar. This is the anchor. This is how we continue to move, even if our executive director of X number of years decides that this is too much, life happens, whatever, and they have to step away abruptly, and maybe you don't have time to do a full transition plan, right? This is what happens if some of your team leaves or your board turns over because it's time or it's too much, that we make sure that these things are in place so that folks are not always starting over at zero each time we have a change in transition, or if there's a change in priorities, etc. And so, change in leadership or a change in priorities. So we want to make sure that we are thinking about these pieces of documentation as opportunities for us to strengthen our organization, and not just as like tedious things that like we'll get to when we get to, because it's not sexy, it's not fun, and in some instances it's kind of overwhelming or just boring to do, you know? So here, like, let's check in, like, which area of documentation is your greatest vulnerability right now? And again, if you're here live, you're watching the replay, go ahead and drop it in the comments. If you don't feel comfortable with that, send me a private message. Like, but let's check in, at the very least, identify for yourself, which area is your greatest vulnerability? Is it governance? Is it financial? Is it operational? Which one is it? And if you're not sure, I don't know how many times I'm going to do this before I like get it together, friends. So we're just going to deal with me. I'm sure there's a way for me to lock this thing, but I'll have to figure that out afterwards. Let's go ahead and do a scan so that you can kind of start to think for yourself which one of these is the one that maybe is jumping out the most. Because again, in every single one of these lives, we want to prioritize an area. And I think if you've been tracking across all of them, at some point you will have a theme or a trend in the areas that you're stronger in and the areas that need more attention. So take a minute and ask yourself these things. Do we have documentations for all major decisions? And this is a governance question. Do we have our governance documents in place? Do we have documentation for all major decisions? Can someone go and find the meeting minutes where a decision was made, it was voted on, and we have that recorded? Could we pass a compliance audit tomorrow? If someone showed up, popped up, and was like, hey, we want to audit what's going on here in your fiscal and financial aspect of your organization, could you pass? Like, do you have the things in place to show that there are fiscal controls, that you are doing the documentation and the reporting that you need to? Do you have this piece in place? If not, if someone came to your door tomorrow and you would be sweating bullets, you might need to really focus on getting your financial documentation in order and having a plan. And this is also kind of around the time that happens, beginning of the year, depending on what your fiscal year is. Sometimes people take more or less action at that point, but we also want to have a habit and a pattern of checking in on these things, especially your budget, on an ongoing basis. All right, maybe it's not governance, maybe it's not financial, but what about this? Are your workflows written down or living in people's heads? Can we find where and how the sauce gets made, what the process is? Or is it just that you have one or two really overperforming superstar staff members or volunteers or board members who just know what it is? But if they just, won the lottery and moved to some remote island to enjoy peace and quiet and comfort, the organization would be SOL. And if that is the case, then we have an operational issue in terms of our documentation, and that might be where you want to start. Wherever your answer is, that reveals where that risk lies for you. And my goal is to help you figure out how you take the next best step to improve that area so that you are protected as we move into a season with increased regulatory scrutiny, political antics, I guess is what I will call it, and funding constriction. So we just want to make sure that we are getting our ducks in a row, right? Documentation isn't just paperwork. This is your protection. It's clarity. It's trust. It's preparation. It's legacy building. And in 2026, documentation will impact who survives scrutiny and who does not. And so let us not wait until the fire is at the door to prepare a plan and for our organization. Let's be measured and thoughtful about building these things, improving these things right now. Again, if today revealed that you have some gaps, I do not want you to stress. I do not want you to be overwhelmed or to be demoralized. I just want you to understand that this is a signal and you have an opportunity to take a step. to improve it, right? I've shared with you what type of documentation we need to have in each of these categories. And so now you have information that you can leverage to start documenting better and protect yourself and your organization today. I know we are just at time, and so again, I definitely want to invite you into deeper relationship and learning with me so that you can continue to get the information that you need to improve governance in real time. As I mentioned, on December 2nd, I'm going to be diving deeper into how we strengthen your board, protect your leadership, and position your organization for 2026 with our Govern Audaciously, how to protect, prepare, and position your nonprofit for 2026. We're going to be diving into what funders and regulators are looking at now, some of the key compliance and governance gaps that we see over our years of work in this area, and some tangible steps that you can use to take to move yourself forward as we get ready to start a new year that may be even more outrageous than this year has been for this sector. And so I invite you to join me essentially for lunch. It's happening at 12 p.m. Eastern on Tuesday, December 2nd, virtually. But I'd love to have you in the building. I'd love to be in further conversation and dialogue with you and of support to you and your organization if it makes sense. And so I hope with that that you are ending this week on a positive note, that you were able to nourish yourself yesterday and today with people and things that you are grateful for. I am absolutely grateful for the opportunity to come before you and share this information and to help the organizations that want to take this information to the next level. It is my honor and privilege to assist you, to walk alongside you as we build a better sector that is selfishly more disruptive, so that ultimately we can all have the future that we deserve, and that the dignity and honor that belongs with every person in all communities is restored, and we are able to do that in a way that is sustainable for you all, the change makers who are willing to put your lives on the line in so many ways to ensure that the future is better than it is today. And so with that, thank you so much for the work that you do, for tuning in, for the comments, the encouragement. It absolutely means the world to me. And as we continue to fight for the future we deserve, I am in your corner, and I am always encouraging you to go lead audaciously. Have a good one.